Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, July 6th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 58 days. The game against Michigan in 142 days. This is normally supposed to be the nice quiet time of year when we can do stories about all sorts of different stuff and big picture views of the sport and all that kind of stuff. And recruiting news keeps happening and stuff keeps changing. And so we end up doing a bunch of these recruiting shows. We're going to have a little more recruiting news potentially later on today. Four-star cornerback Miles Lockhart out of Arizona going to be announcing his commitment later today on Thursday. Are the Buckeyes considered the favorite right now? If he does choose Ohio State, we will have an instant reaction show for you a little later on this afternoon, coming to you at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle and on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. If we do have news on that front, we will bring it to you as soon as it happens, so keep an eye out for that a little later on today. But before there is more news on that front, I did want to do one of these more traditional kind of off-season type shows, because we just haven't had a chance to do a lot of those. And Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com wrote a really interesting article recently about kickoffs and sort of the long, slow decline of kickoffs, and are we witnessing sort of the death of kickoffs and kickoff returns, and what used to be the most exciting play in college football, is that just kind of a thing of the past now? So Tony joins me this morning. Tony, I think this is something that, having watched the Ted Ginn era at Ohio State, I think you and I both know exactly how exciting kickoff returns can be, punt returns and to a certain degree as well. But it feels like just over the last 10 to 15 years, the importance of the kickoff and the emphasis on the kickoff has sort of dwindled a little bit. And it feels like a lot of that traces back to a very worthwhile aim, which is player safety.
Yeah, player safety. The rule that has really diminished things was put forth in 2018 to allow any fair catch to be considered a touchback, and the ball would be put at the 25 for the offense. And since then, you've had that's put in motion a decision-making process for head coaches in terms of, how do we want to approach this? Do we just want to get the ball back and get going? Do we want to? Yes, as you said, it's supposed to take into account player safety. Although I remember talking to Justin Hilliard, Ohio State linebacker, after 1 week of this being implemented, and talking to him afterwards, and he said, it's a stupid rule because the only person who is not still getting hit is the returner himself. Because all of the other collisions are still taking place, because you have to run down as if he's going to return it, and you have to block as if the return is going to happen, unless, of course, the plan has been put forth by the team. We're not returning anything. We're just going to fair catch everything, and then the blockers know that. Otherwise, all of those collisions are still taking place. The only thing that's not happening is somebody isn't tackling that one guy. And so, talking to Parker Fleming, Ohio State special teams coordinator, about this back in May, that was a point of contention for him as well. Yes, in some worlds, this is a good idea. It does eliminate some harm, but the player safety, there's still things going on, because you can't take anything for granted. You still have to block. You still have to hit. Now, they have changed some other rules, like, wedge busting and things like that as well. But at some point, it just seems like they're just moving to the point where, why are we even kicking off anymore? If you can just fair catch it and go ahead and get the ball at the 25, let's just like we would do on the in grade school. You just start off on first down at 20 or whatever, and go from there.
Yeah, and talking about not being able to take things for granted, it's very easy to look at it and say, well, obviously they're not returning. They haven't returned anything all day. So obviously the sixth kick return of the day, they're not going to be returning this one either. I always go back, I think it was Marshall, 4 or 5 years ago, where they basically had a fake fair catch on a punt, and everyone just sort of the guy just caught it and just sort of stood there, and everyone sort of stopped and started walking away. And then the punt returner takes off upfield because he'd never made a signal. It was like one of those baseball plays where, everyone's just sort of standing there and the batter's not out and the batter's not safe, or, they haven't made, no one, the batter has not, the runner has not touched the plate and the runner hasn't been tagged out, and everyone's just sort of standing there waiting and looking around, and it's like, oh, the play's still going on. Uh-oh. And that's a real good way to look real stupid. So, you really truly can't take anything for granted in the kicking game. And the way things have changed, it has just sort of been, it's been like a ratchet where it moves and it can't move back. There's been nothing that has made the kickoff more wide open. Like it hasn't gone backwards in any way towards what it used to be. It just has kind of been consistently just a little bit less exciting and a little bit less action. Again, towards a very noble purpose of trying to keep guys safe. We have talked before about, where does this all end? Does this end with, that teams just get it on the 25 and the kickoff is gone forever? And, the Greg Schiano idea of you treat it as fourth and 15 if you want to convert an onside kick, you just give your offense like a 4th and 15 kind of play. And so you don't have to have any more kicks. Some of the spring football leagues are trying some different stuff. Where does this end? What do we do? What are we looking at when we're talking about kickoffs in 15 years?
I think it will require a drastic rule of some sort, because at this point, Tom, imagine college football without Devin Hester or returning kickoffs and guys like that were just, you tuned in to watch them. It was a huge part of the game, and it was something that you wanted to see. And to eliminate that would be, it would be bad for the sport, maybe good for player safety. But I also think there are ways to do things that can effectively help that player safety, while also keeping the kickoff live. And I would point at the XFL's kickoff rule, which the kickoff is from like the 30, and the defense is 35 yards downfield, but they can't move until the ball is caught. Like the only two people that can move before the ball is caught is the returner and the kicker. And everybody is like down there waiting for the kick. You've got the blockers, you've got the defense. And basically it would be like any other kind of collision play in football, because you don't have somebody running 50 yards to go hit somebody. You just have somebody running 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards. It would be a normal play. And I know there's this emphasis on a number of, I forget the actual words, but number of pieces of contact basically over a course of what could be 15, 16, 17 games. Yeah, you want to eliminate them. I think this is a way to keep the kickoff return in the game. It's such a dramatic rule change. I hope something like that would be the way they would go before just getting rid of it entirely. And really, they can keep doing this for years, and they'll say, well, we're not getting rid of it, but effectively you're encouraging people not to do it. But again, you're not really, you're protecting 1/11th of the return team out there, and everybody else is still able to be lit up.
And I'm going to fact check myself very quickly here. It was North Texas, not Marshall. I saw the play in my head. They were wearing white and white helmets with green on them. It was North Texas, not Marshall, on the fake fair catch punt return. The Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast sincerely regrets the error. All right, moving on. Yeah, I think that the thing that people need to understand is the difference between the amount of force involved in a play where it's an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman crashing into each other from 1.5 yards away, or a linebacker meeting a running back and they both have 4 yards of a head of steam built up. That's very different than a kickoff coverage guy running 50 yards and crashing into a blocker who is has either no head of steam or has a little bit of a head of steam. The kickoff play, when they did injury injury analysis several years ago, kickoffs were some order of magnitude higher in terms of the number of injuries suffered on kickoff plays, and some really serious ones. Eric LeGrand, the Rutgers player who was paralyzed, that was a kickoff return against Army several years ago. So you've had some really, you get a lot of concussions and broken bones and that kind of stuff, but you also get you get a lot of other, very serious injuries. There was the kickoff return that Britton Covey had for Utah against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago. That was the play that Lathan Ransom broke his leg on. And someone else, one of the walk-ons who was on kick coverage on that play, was hurt for Ohio State too. There were 2 Ohio State guys down on that same play. And that is just statistically where a lot of those injuries happen. So it feels like, there has been some progress here. It's made the game not quite as exciting, but also it's made the game slightly safer. It just feels like you're sort of headed towards something. And is it the XFL rule? it's probably good that that football has a little bit of a workshop kind of area to explore this stuff in a relatively low stakes, like no offense to the XFL folks, for whom the championship is, I'm sure, meaningful, but it's probably not as meaningful as the college football championship or the NFL Super Bowl championship. So it's a little bit of a workshop to try things the way baseball uses, like the Atlantic League and independent leagues, to workshop, like, hey, should we make the bases bigger? Hey, should we change the rules on, hey, should we move the mound back? Whatever it is, try it out, see if it works. And if it seems like it's working, maybe that is where this ends up. How different is football if you remove kickoffs entirely? How, does that benefit the better teams? Does that benefit the worse teams? It feels like that might, with Ohio State not having returned to kickoff for a touchdown since 2010 and having won, multiple football games since that time, it feels like maybe that's beneficial to the teams that are better and are able to maybe grind out the long drives or, make the bigger plays on offense and not being as reliant on the sort of bolt of lightning plays as, an underdog trying to pull an upset.
Ohio State has had the advantage in kickoff returning over their opponents for a while now. And it's not because they return it so well. It's because they kept the opponent from returning it so well. And we know the kicks to the 5 in the corner when sometimes it goes out of bounds, 4 times a year, and everybody gets irate and thinks it's the dumbest idea of all time. But a number of those kicks get stopped at the 15-yard line, and now you're forcing the opponent to go an extra first down than they would have had to do. And now they no longer have to do that. They no longer get pinned at the 12 for a bad decision coming out at, from the 2 or whatever and getting stopped there. So they can just accept that 25-yard line. So basically, Ohio State is now giving their opponents an extra first down than they would like the opportunity to, they would prefer the opportunity to pin them at the 15, and the opponent has taken them, the rule has taken that away from them. And so that helps everybody else other than the teams that want to do that. So there's that negativity to it there. But like I said, I hope it sticks around, but it has been neutered for sure. And the more you neuter it, then you're like, well, do we even need it? People aren't even using it anymore. And you can look at last year in 2022, there were 30 total kickoff return touchdowns nationally. The high point over the last 20 years was 2009 with 84. And that's just, only 30 touchdown returns. Why do we even do it anymore? And I think it may have been Jason Moore, Ohio State freshman defensive lineman, wrote about him and looking at some of his clips from high school, and I believe it was him. But he would do kickoff coverage, and there were a couple times where he's just running down and just destroys a blocker that is then slow to get up, and those are the injuries that come from kickoff returns. The last time Ohio State had a kickoff returner injured, it was friendly fire from Roy Hall, I think, if I might be correct on that one. Ted Ginn getting injured on a touchdown celebration. So it's not about the rule is about protecting the kickoff returner, but how many returners are actually the ones that are getting hurt?
Yeah, again, this feels like progress, but there's probably, everyone's looking at exposures is the term they use, by the way, in terms of how many times you're getting hit. And they talk about that in terms of pace of play, in terms of number of snaps. And, hey, we're going to change the clock rule, and that's going to give you fewer exposures. And then, then it's not as big a deal. If the season's a game longer for certain teams because of the 12-team college football playoff, it's just the number of times you're getting hit, because they don't want you to, they don't want that number to go significantly up and create potentially long-term health impacts. So if they can do that and they can make football a safer game to play, I know, how many times have we heard football is never going to be a safe game to play, but it could potentially be a safer game to play. So, that is something that's going to be kind of critical to the long-term future of the sport, so that football doesn't turn into boxing. And, that's not something that's going to happen in 3 years. That's not something that's going to happen in 15 years, but 60 years from now, maybe if a slightly safer game of football maybe makes it more likely that football retains its place in American sports as they continue to develop better technology and equipment and all that kind of stuff as well. So just thought that was kind of an interesting conversation, something that has been sort of gradually shifting And, you look back, the number from 2009 that you mentioned, 2009 to 2022, basically being cut in almost third in terms of number of kickoff return touchdowns. That's pretty jarring. It did not happen overnight, but it's sort of just been a gradual trend. And so it'll be really interesting to see where that trend line moves moving forward. So we'll keep an eye on that and probably have another update on that, I would guess, next offseason when we have time to look at this kind of fun stuff. But we are heading into the busy time of year again at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It is a very busy recruiting time, as I mentioned earlier off the top of the show. Ohio State looking to potentially add a commitment later on today. If they get that, you'll get a instant reaction show on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed and on YouTube at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle on the potential commitment of cornerback Miles Lockhart out of Arizona. And then more commitments coming potentially later on this month. Linebacker Kingston Viliamuasa set to announce on July 23rd. Cornerback Aaron Scott set to announce on July 30th. We talked about all this stuff on yesterday's show. Go back and listen to that. There's many, many more coming in August as well. But Big Ten Media Days also just a couple weeks away at this point. So the unofficial start of Ohio State's 2023 season right around the corner. It's been a long enough offseason. I am ready for some football, as Hank Williams once asked. The answer is yes, Hank. I am ready for some football. And I'm sure you are as well. And if you are, make sure you join us at Buckeye Huddle for coverage of recruiting, coverage of the team, all that good stuff, all in one spot. Fantastic community, lots of fun, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.